There are moments in Scripture that feel like a quiet pause after a storm. The flood narrative in Genesis is filled with movement, urgency, and weight. Waters rise. The earth is covered. Life is reduced to what fits within the ark and what God preserves beneath the waters. Then, slowly the rain stops. The waters recede. The ark comes to rest. And for the first time after judgment, Scripture invites us to listen again for God's voice, not in warning, but in promise. What does it mean when God speaks after devastation? What kind of word follows loss, grief, and renewal? And how does that word still speak into a world that continues to experience chaos, violence, and uncertainty? This is Bible Scope, your place to find light, find truth, and find purpose if this journey speaks to your heart. Like the video and subscribe to walk through Scripture with us. As we walk slowly through the covenant God makes with Noah, we're not rushing to conclusions. We are reading carefully, verse by verse, allowing the text to unfold in its own time. This covenant is not only ancient history, it is foundational theology. It tells us something essential about God's character, about humanity's place in creation, and about the future of the world itself. The covenant appears in Genesis chapter 9, but its roots reach back into earlier chapters. Before the flood, Scripture describes a world filled with violence. Human imagination, we are told, was continually bent toward evil. God's grief over creation is expressed in language that is deeply relational. This is not a distant deity reacting mechanically. This is a God who is personally invested in what he has made. Yet even in judgment, preservation is present. Noah finds favor in God's sight, not because he is flawless, but because he walks with God. The ark becomes a vessel of mercy, carrying not only human life, but representatives of the entire living world. Creation itself is drawn into the story of rescue. When the floodwaters finally recede, the first recorded act of Noah is worship. He builds an altar and offers sacrifices. Scripture tells us that God smells the pleasing aroma, a phrase that communicates acceptance, not because God needs offerings, but because relationship is being restored. And then God speaks words that shape the rest of biblical history. God says in his heart that he will never again curse the ground because of humanity, even though human inclination remains flawed. This is a profound statement. God does not wait for humanity to improve before committing himself. He acknowledges human weakness and still chooses faithfulness. This sets the stage for the covenant that follows in Genesis 9. God blesses Noah and his sons, echoing the blessing given to Adam and Eve. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. The language deliberately mirrors creation. This is a re-beginning, not a replacement. God is reaffirming his commitment to the world he made. But there's also a realism present. Fear and dread of humans will now fall upon animals. The harmony of Eden is no longer fully intact. Permission is given to eat meat with boundaries that honor life. Blood, representing life itself, is treated as sacred. Human violence is addressed with gravity. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, because humanity is made in the image of God. Life matters because God's image is present in every person. Then, the covenant is formally established. God speaks directly, not only to Noah, but to his sons and beyond them, to every living creature. This detail is easy to overlook, but it is essential. This covenant is not limited to one family, one nation, or one religious group. It is universal. God says he establishes his covenant with Noah and his descendants after him, and with every living creature that came out of the ark. The promise is clear. Never again will all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will a flood destroy the earth. This does not mean the world will never experience disaster or suffering. Scripture is honest about ongoing hardship, but it does mean that God binds himself to the continuity of creation. The rhythms of life will endure to seal this promise. God gives a sign. He sets his bow in the clouds. The Hebrew word used here is the same word used for a weapon of war, a bow. The imagery is striking. God places his weapon in the sky, pointing away from the earth. It is as if divine judgment has been laid down, not abolished forever, but restrained within covenantal mercy. The rainbow is not described as something newly created. Rather, God assigns meaning to something already present. This is important. God often works through the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary. The rainbow becomes a visible reminder, spanning heaven and earth, that God remembers his promise, and God emphasizes remembrance repeatedly. When the bow is seen in the clouds, God says he will remember his covenant. This is not because God forgets. In Scripture, remembrance is covenant language. It means active faithfulness. God is declaring that his actions toward the world will always be shaped by this promise. What does this reveal about God? It reveals a God who limits himself for the sake of his creation. A God who commits to relationship even when humanity remains imperfect. A God who values continuity, patience, and mercy. The global scope of this covenant cannot be overstated. Unlike later covenants with Abraham, Israel, or David, the covenant with Noah applies to all humanity and all living creatures. It is the foundation upon which all other covenants rest. Without this promise, history itself would be unstable. Across cultures and civilizations, flood stories appear in ancient memory. From Mesopotamian epics to oral traditions around the world, humanity remembers water as both destroyer and renewer. The biblical account does not deny this shared memory. Instead, it offers interpretation. It reveals not chaotic fate, but a moral God who judges and preserves with purpose. The rainbow, then, becomes a universal symbol, not owned by any single people. It appears to all, regardless of belief or background. Every time it arcs across the sky, it silently declares that the world continues because God remains faithful. As Scripture unfolds, this covenant echoes forward. The prophets speak of God's enduring commitment to creation. The Psalms celebrate God's faithfulness to his promises. Even when Israel breaks covenant, God remembers mercy that in the New Testament. The language of covenant deepens further. Judgment and mercy meet at the cross. Creation itself is described as groaning, awaiting renewal. The final vision of Scripture is not escape from the world, but restoration of it. A new heaven and a new earth. The Noahic covenant prepares us for this hope. It tells us that God does not abandon what he makes. Spiritually, the covenant invites personal reflection. Many people live with an underlying fear that failure will lead to abandonment. That one mistake will undo everything. The covenant with Noah challenges this fear. God acknowledges human brokenness and still commits himself to faithfulness. This does not remove responsibility. Humanity is still accountable. Violence still grieves God. Choices still matter. But the foundation beneath it all is promise, not threat. When we see the rainbow today, it is easy to treat it as ordinary or to attach meanings disconnected from its biblical roots. Scripture invites us to slow down, to look again, to remember that this sign was given first as reassurance, not to humanity alone, but to God's own relationship with the world. It reminds us that creation is not disposable, that history is not random, that God's patience stretches across generations, and that even after judgment, God speaks hope. For the listener today, this covenant speaks quietly but firmly. It asks us to trust in God's long-term faithfulness, not just in moments of blessing, but in seasons of uncertainty. It invites us to honor life, to resist violence, and to live with gratitude for the stability God provides. That it also reminds us that God's promises often outlast our awareness. The covenant with Noah continues whether humanity acknowledges it or not. God remains faithful even when forgotten. As we've walked through this passage, what truth stood out to you? How might it shape the way you live today? If this exploration helped you grow, like the video and subscribe. Your journey through the pages is just beginning.